Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We're so happy that you could be with us today. My name is Holly. I am one of the customer success managers here at Kelvin. And today we're so excited to have our special guest, Shere and Jeremy from Shasta County joining us, and we will be introducing them in just a moment. But as we're having guests join us today, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ari, who's going to run a check-in with us and just get us connected today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Holly. Wonderful to see everyone joining us. Thank you so much, Shere and Jeremy, for taking time off your busy schedules to join us today. And we're looking so forward to hearing what you have to say. As Holly said, my name is Ari, and I work in the education department at Kelvin. So I'm very excited to be here. And, as a former educator, I know that we always have to start with our check-ins to understand, what's going on and get a bit of a feel for the room. So I'd love everyone to pop in the chat what is one highlight from the new school year? What's one thing that stood out to you as a highlight? So please feel free to go pop that in the chat. And I'm just going to actually hand it over and ask if Shere or Jeremy, you guys off the top of your head, have anything that you want to share. One highlight, maybe there's been a nice story that you can quickly share with us. I'm going to hand it over to you if you've got anything to share off the top of your head from the new school year.
Well, I think the thing that I feel super excited about with this new school year is just the level of engagement and excitement that we're seeing as people restarted the school year, and just really felt like people had a lot of excitement and desire to jump in and get the new year going. So just really continue to see the engagement and excitement across our county, and that's felt like a great highlight to share.
Wonderful, Shere. I think for so many of us, that excitement, it feels like we've reached a threshold. There's something new, there's something in the air changing about, something a little bit different about the school year. Maybe it's the shift from the COVID space, but it's really exciting. And it's awesome to see in the chat, we've got some things coming through of the energy in the school year. Definitely agree with Shere. The energy is palpable, and we can all, kind of grab that. The response from staff and students have been great so far. Definitely there's a buzz. And I think this is something we can all capitalize on as educators. That energy, and let's keep it up. Let's keep up that positive energy. Holly adding in the chat, my youngest of 4 kids just started preschool and is excited to learn. Nothing better when students start school and they're excited to learn. Fantastic. So keep those highlights coming through. We can see them. We'd love to see them. Feel free to post them in the chat. But it's a wonderful way to start off to think about what's going right, what's working in the school year. And I'd really encourage everyone to be mindful what's going right in the school year, because we can get bogged down pretty easily as educators. So let's keep our chins up. Let's support each other. And back over to you, Holly. Thanks everyone for joining. Holly, you're on mute. Just want to jump in there. Happens to the best of us.
It wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't start chatting on mute. So yes, thank you, Ari, and thank you everyone willing to share. And just to bring us back to what we're here for today, if you joined us, this is the Kelvin Education in Shasta County webinar. So we are talking today about countywide screeners. And as I mentioned, we have 2 very awesome guest speakers, Shere DePaoli and Jeremy Sawtelle from Shasta County Office of Education. And they're going to give a more proper introduction in just a couple of moments here. And just briefly, what we'll talk about today is we'll introduce our Kelvin team, and we won't belabor that point because we have previous webinars that go into more depth, and we'll also be providing some social media updates on that soon. We'll introduce the guest speakers, and then they're going to present about their countywide screeners. And then we'll leave a few minutes for Q&A, but please do feel welcome to drop questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. And we are excited to get going, so let's move on forward. And our Kelvin team, if you're here, you probably have some idea of what Kelvin is and what we do. We are a software company that provides survey software, and really particularly started out in the SEL world and trying to reach out to students and help them in real time and help schools and districts be able to get that actionable data and help the students more quickly than you might do just from offering a summative assessment once or twice a year. So this allows schools and districts to be able to get that data quickly and be able to help the student. So with that said, you'll see our fun emojis here, and hopefully you get the idea that we do have a lot of fun at our company. We're a small but mighty team. You can see here, Zach is our CEO, one of the co-founders here at Kelvin. You'll see myself, I've introduced myself already as one of the customer success managers. Before getting here, I worked in higher education for several years and worked in various capacities, but love seeing students succeed. So it's really fun to work in this capacity. James is also one of the co-founders. He's the CTO. And I have Justin. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Justin.
Justin's one of the customer success managers as well. You'll probably see him in the chat. Ari also introduced himself. Ari, did you want to throw anything else in there?
Ari, just very passionate about education, SEL. I come from South Africa, so that's a little bit of the different accent that you're hearing. Yeah, love connecting with anyone. And if you'd ever like to chat, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll put our email at the end. Always passionate about SEL. And whatever we can do to assist, to help, really just service children to schools, districts. We're really all here to help one another and make the world a happier and healthier place.
Thanks, Ari. And then last but not least, we have Josh, who joined our team, and he handles a lot of our project management and administrative side of things. And he's a great addition to our team as well. But let's go ahead and get to the meat of the presentation. I am so excited to turn it over to Sherry and Jeremy. And now that I put this teaser up, Jeremy, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you take over screen share. But if you want to go ahead and jump in and introduce yourselves.
Okay. Well, I'm Shere DePaoli, and as Holly mentioned, we are with Shasta County Office of Education. Been here in the county office about 5 years. Prior to that, in a district, K-8 district for well over 30 years. So just enjoying the work here we're doing in the county and looking at it through the lens of how we can support our districts, which we'll share a little bit about that with you related to our SEL work. Jeremy.
And then I'm Jeremy Sawtelle. I'm the Director of Specialized Student Support with Shasta County Office of Education, and I have the wonderful privilege of being able to work with the Kelvin team over the past couple of years, and my partner Shere DePaoli for just using this and the different ways that we have for what Kelvin can offer, and just the amazing progress that we've seen so far. We're just happy to be here and share with you. All right, so a little bit of context. I threw that in kind of as a joke, but also like we're kind of a small state here in Shasta County. So if you look at the square miles, there's Rhode Island and Delaware, and we're a little bit bigger than them. But we have 27,000 students across 25 school districts. And so we are pretty well spread out here in Shasta County. And we have some of our schools ranging from 17 students to 2,200 students. And so there's quite the variability. And also it takes about an hour and a half or so to get from one side of the county to the other. And most of that is rural area. So something like this, and we'll be able to talk more about just how we use Kelvin for that alignment and collective effort. But Sherry, your experience with Shasta County, what do you think other than the map here?
I agree with everything you said, and what I appreciate about our county is the range of school sizes that we have. And although we have several small districts, single school districts, we have similar needs across our county. And so something that I think, regardless of size, many of you will relate in terms of context and population that we work with each and every day. And
when she's talking kind of population and the who we get to serve within our community. We know that on average, Shasta County and some of our surrounding counties have higher than average ACE scores. So if you're familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experience study, just the amount of kind of traumatic events that can occur and just what we know based on the research of ACEs, and how we need to approach things differently when we're talking about ACEs, when we're serving our students. And Kelvin has actually given us another huge tool within our toolkit to serve and to support our students. So if you look at the graph here, the different categories of ACEs, we have Shasta County in orange, and then the California state average there in blue. And I'll have Shere kind of talk about, so with that, with knowing the range and the rural area that we have within Shasta County and the level of need within social emotional well-being and just student supports, this is, I'll let Shere kind of talk through why Kelvin, why did we choose that?
Yeah, so given what we all experienced through COVID, we were having really a large need and requests with some actual live data that our schools could use to help track some of the SEL data that was happening. And it was not a new request that happened in COVID. We have been doing a lot of work in our county through just different SEL teams, different SEL programs for several years. So, and then this ACE work that Jeremy just shared, again, that was something our county had gone through some training on several years ago. So this was not a new request, something we had all kind of worked together with and tried to understand what we could do and use across our entire county to understand both from the school level, but then to understand the context of how does my school compare to the rest of the county? And that was a missing link for us. We had a lot of different schools that were coming up with different ways to measure SEL. But again, they were struggling a little bit with the collection of the data and then what would be the best thing to measure and then the research behind where do we gather our questions. And so again, this was just a series of several years with which this conversation happened. And then of course, COVID hit and that just accelerated the need for this kind of work and feeling like people needed not only real-time live data with their students, but also with their staff. And so how can we, and parents were going through a lot, with COVID as well. So that's when we were able to bring in Kelvin because it really helped us identify a way to measure some of this SEL data through the lens that I just explained. And we were able to do this through a pilot. So we had a handful of districts that we brought on board to pilot in the spring, would be 2 years ago, 2023. And we had districts that were across different grade spans. And we wanted to really build the consistency with these districts and kind of get a sense of what this could look like. And it would satisfy that need for having leading data that would guide us. So we sometimes we get stuck in this. We want to be responsive to our lagging data, but we really were struggling with what leading data can we use so that we can really look at what is happening and then try to impact change before the next round and more than just once or twice a year. So that's why we landed with Kelvin, because it really just did help us answer all of those needs and questions that were lingering out there with our districts.
And one thing that we notice within a lot of our system, we make a lot of changes and we build SEL programs and we jump in and we try and do our evidence-based practices and we look at the research, what should we do? But a lot of that misses the student voice component. And we really, with our initiatives, this is an opportunity for us to really hear what the students are saying. How are the things that we're doing impacting from the student side, and how can we use that feedback? They are the true user of the school system. We need to build our schools around student voice, student perspective, and not just kind of have it focused on adults. And we understand the need to support our adults as well, but the more we can hear from our students, the better our systems are, or the healthier our systems are. So that's just something that why Kelvin, we were able to do these things. And also that capturing of student voice has just been a huge piece of guiding our work and helping our districts kind of narrow focus and hone in on the area of need. So building buy-in, I'm going to really lean, Sherry had this going. I got to the honor of kind of stepping in once there was the pilot going, and she had done all of the foundational work. So I'm coming in a little bit after her. So that building a buy-in, Sherry's the expert of getting people together. So I'll have her touch on what that process looked like.
And really getting the buy-in, but then keeping it moving. And that's where Jeremy has come into play. So don't sell yourself short there. But in terms of the buy-in, what we really spent some time doing is getting a group of people together who could test this out. And I spoke a little bit to this a moment ago, but we had a pilot group that covered the spectrum of elementary, middle, and high school. And we started small. So we had, as I mentioned, a handful of districts that we started with, and we started with the administrator. And we had that administrator come on board. We had Kelvin present to everybody across our county initially, to all of our superintendents, and we just said, we're looking for a small target group that we want to pilot this with. And so we had some administrators, or superintendents, I should say, who stepped forward and or handed it off to one of their administrators to kind of be a part of this test pilot. And so the goal in sharing this initially with our countywide superintendent group was that we were going to work towards developing a consistent set of questions that we would administer through these pulses to all of our students across our county. And so once we had our test group of school sites that were willing to be a part of this pilot, we then worked with Kelvin and really looked through the evidence-based questions that were available through various sources to fine-tune the number of questions that we would ask in our pulse surveys. And so we wanted a cross-section of different dimensions, which we'll talk to in a little bit. But we really then narrowed down to the questions that we wanted to administer. And then these were the target questions that were administered across our county. So with that, we all agreed that we would be on the same timeline. We would administer these same pulses 5 different times during the year. And then we would come together and share out the results. So if we think about things like academic data or state testing data, we always know we can access, our own school data, we can access publicly our district data, and then we can also access how our state did. But we've never been able to do that in the context of SEL data. And so that was a real big buy-in for this, is that we could really have our schools look at their own data, but they would have the ability to then see how their school and district is doing in comparison to the county, because sometimes we don't really know. Is our school similar or is it different? And just that was a question that really, I think our districts really had a lot of buy-in to, because they were very anxious to see how their population SEL data was comparing to the rest of the county. So that was a part of the pilot, and where we came to agreement around these questions that would be administered through the pulses 5 times a year.
And just kind of for context, at this point, we have so many of our districts who are involved in this now, and it has grown substantially. Just over the past 2 years, we have a large group, and we'll talk more about kind of how we structured that, but just seeing what that pilot started as and kind of figuring out those things and hearing that open and vulnerable conversation of, hey, we're troubleshooting this, we're getting implementation going, and we have to learn from each other, and building those relationships and watching Sherry kind of navigate these conversations when there were tech things on the district side or on the Kelvin side. It's like, hey, this is our collective goal, is to have this up and running. Let's be open about what needs to happen. And just it fast-tracked this process. And now we've learned so much about when we're implementing with our new districts who are signing on every year. We're seeing, oh, we've seen this before in the last year. We can make this happen pretty quickly. So that's just been a huge piece of just that starting small, test, adapt, and then scale. So, and Sherry and I will talk all day about improvement science, so I'm going to drop it there because we are big fans there. Sherry, I don't know if I added the heart this morning, so sorry.
I loved it. Thank you. I noticed that. But yes, as Jeremy said, we've grown. So our pilot lasted, it was, like I said, in the spring. And throughout that pilot, we would bring back our countywide data with our whole collective superintendent group so that they could see what was working through our pilot. And then we now are at a place where this school year, we have almost everybody across our county. Most of our districts are participating in this in full scale. And something I didn't mention on the previous slide when we were talking about starting small, the other thing for the pilot is for our schools who participated in the pilot, we had them pick a grade level or two or range. As an example, we had some schools that were K-8 and they selected just their junior high. Or we had some K-5s and they just picked a couple of grade levels. So again, just trying to start small and see what kind of data we can get was really helpful. So the other thing for buy-in and things like Jeremy was talking about, as we're moving through, we're learning and we're sharing and we're adapting. And so really one of the huge benefits of this was that these pulses were really not disruptive to instruction. And again, as we were moving through the pilot, we're asking our teachers, our administrators that were involved in this pilot, what are you noticing? How are you feeling when you administer these pulses? Because in the past, we had done things like, the Google form, which has its advantages, but sometimes that can be disruptive because we have to stop instruction and administer the form. So the way that the pulses were designed is that they're live for a week, and so students can take this pulse at any time during the week. It can be structured that way, or teachers can say, on Monday morning when it opens up, we're all going to sit down and take our pulse. So teachers have flexibility in how it works, but it was not disruptive to instruction. And so that was just really a huge buy-in for our principals, our administrators, and then for teachers as well. Something that we also found to be very helpful in the buy-in, and this was something we learned a little bit later once we kicked off the formal use of Kelvin, is that we had each district have a lead contact person. And so really knowing in that district who was that lead that they could go to, and then that helped us at the county level know who we could also connect with. Or if they had a question, they could contact us, or we could direct them to Kelvin. So it really just helped kind of streamline the communication and help troubleshoot as we were going. And so that was something that I think really was helpful in the buy-in and identifying who some of these people could be to help with the implementation. And again, that it did tremendously help with the ease of training and implementation. And I kind of touched on this already, but it really just, this Kelvin data really became something that through the use of it last year, that schools just really shared how there was such relevancy to this data across the school system. So many times when schools are looking at the academic data, maybe that doesn't necessarily involve everybody on the campus, or maybe our paraprofessionals are not involved in some of those conversations, but many our districts are sharing things around, how this Kelvin data really is something that has taken root with all of the users across the campus. So just, again, really help to have that buy-in across the school campus.
And Sherry, I don't want to stop your flow, but we did get a question that came in asking if this was a cohesive SEL effort or SEL program being implemented across the county during the year that the screener was used, and they said they could see how pulses can be used to evaluate the impact of those efforts.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, we have many different I shouldn't say many, we have a handful of SEL curriculums that are being used in our county. And so what Kelvin did is Kelvin just supports any of those curriculums, and it doesn't mean you have to use one or the other, but I will say that a benefit of Kelvin is there are many they have a toolbox. And so the idea being that when your data comes out after a pulse and you can identify some areas that maybe you want to work on between now and your next pulse, You can use tools within Kelvin to do that, or you can use a curriculum that maybe your site has. So our county did not have a countywide curriculum that was being used. We had several, but Kelvin supported all of the curriculums.
And that's something that as we have so many, I mean, whether it's like teachers pay teachers or just something that you can Google that's a PDF, there's so many different things that really have that face value that, oh, this looks professional, this looks well-researched, this looks whatever it is. And so there's an easy, when we're kind of feeling underwater in education, we grab on to different things and maybe this will work, maybe this will work, maybe this will work. And we see that a lot within our county of we are so passionate and we're in the human industry and we want to help. So we grab things. Kelvin is a way, one of those buckets for us to measure. So, hey, if we're adopting something or if you move forward, we need to know whether or not it's working. And we have to be making better data-driven decisions. And this has been a huge eye-opener. And I'm excited to talk kind of a little bit more about what that is, but I think it does touch on our cohesive SEL efforts as a county and the foundation that we have going there. This just builds in that bucket of that lens of how is this going?
Yeah, and if I could just say real quickly, one of the things that we're very sensitive to is we don't want it to be one more thing, right? When you add one more program, it becomes something that's a standalone, and that was not at all the intent. So what we really tried to do is integrate and utilize what we had and find connections and look for the through line between all of our curriculums and Kelvin. So again, it wasn't just something else, it was fitting in this way, and this is identifying the need. And then I saw something pop up around questions. I think somebody asked how many pulse questions. We had 15 questions through these different 6 domains or dimensions, I should say. So each of these dimensions were the ones that we landed on when we got together in our pilot. And really, we were trying to cover the basis of it being appropriate for grade levels 3 through 12, because they were all part of our pilot. So 3rd grade through 12th grade. And then really, what are the things that we want to know about our students, and where do we want our students to feel like they have a voice in some of these things as well? And so these were the highlighted areas that we really wanted to focus on. So again, we had 15 questions. So they were split between these 6 domains. And this is the way we would then view our data. And really a lot of our schools, and we're getting better at this, is we're really trying to then, when we look at our data, identify which of these dimensions do we want to celebrate. It could be all of them, or there's something to celebrate within each of them. But then looking at through these same dimensions, where do we want to target? What do we want to address between now and our next pulse? So this would be kind of the guide with which we would want to focus and determine what are we going to do with this data? And how are we going to try to impact that data? Will it be through the toolbox? Will it be through our SEL curriculum? Will it be a combination of all? So these were the dimensions that we landed on, and then we've continued to use through our entire use of Kelvin, which will be great because after we finish this year and move forward, we're going to have a couple of years worth of data that's all based on these same questions and the same dimensions. So we'll be able to track over time how we are impacting this specific data.
And with this, we want that countywide collective effort. We want these pulses to come out and to see kind of that overview, that umbrella. What is Shasta County looking like? And like Shere's talking about, these consistent domains, we're pulled because we know the California dashboard, like instructional environment. We have discipline, which would be kind of tied into suspension rates. So we're already doing work in our districts within their LCAPs, and they're developing their LCAPs. And I can kind of talk more in a minute about just seeing Kelvin tied into an LCAP, like we're using this as a bucket, like it's getting baked into systems as a measurement tool. And we could not be more happy about that. But we want that, but we also really strive for building the district capacity. If you have other dimensions, we will support that you are giving out additional pulses, whether that's to family, your staff, or your students. Do you want to measure different things where we're really saying like, hey, green light, we're doing this. Thank you so much for buying into our county effort. We are seeing over time what we are collectively doing as a county. but we know each context, each district has different needs and is evaluating some different things. So please build that pulse in. Let's help you do that. And the Kelvin team has just been like stepping right in and supporting Sherry and I when districts say, hey, can we give an additional pulse? We're like, yes, please do that. That's like, you want to know what your students are saying. But we do kind of caution the use of like the amount of pulses going out as you guys are looking to do this. Just kind of be cognizant of, we don't want to be doing this all of the time to where we know that fatigue can set in. So we're trying to be really strategic, both at this county level of how many pulses we're giving and with our discussions of districts about how many pulses they are giving as well, just so that the students are really giving those authentic responses and we're making sure that we have some really strong data that we're pulling from.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on to what Jeremy was saying there, that was part of the design. When we set up our pulses initially, we give it every other month. And so that enables the district to use that off month with the county-wide pulse to administer their own pulse should they choose to do so. So kind of thinking about structuring it so they can do that if they choose to do so. But if they don't, we're still set up to get 5 pulses a year. And again, they want to go beyond that. We can do that without it being fatiguing for students.
And this is something we're going to touch on, these pulse results, and I'll dive into just some of the teams, but how are we using this data and what's the process for action and change? We've seen, even though we've been in this only a couple of years, again, like it's getting baked into systems. This is becoming a strong measurement tool that districts are starting to rely on, whether that's LCAP or just their improvement work. So how has it made an impact? We have an opportunity just at the county office. We're consultants. We go in and we support, and we're there to provide that additional layer of, hey, we care so much about what's happening. How can we help you? How can we serve? And so we get invited in to just have very open and honest conversations with districts. So I want to show on the left side, one of our districts actually using Kelvin pulses kind of as that temperature check. And so ways to improve, they're using this as their SEL system. So they're running PDSAs, they're doing the improvement work, their team, their weekly teachers, huddles are coming together. And as they're giving that monthly pulse and their own pulses, they're using that to monitor, hey, the SEL things that we're doing in our site, how are they going? How is this? Let's come together every week, check our buckets of data. So you see next to that arrow, they have some other buckets of data. So they have 4 areas that they're measuring every week to determine if the initiatives that they've adopted are working. And now Kelvin is one of those main components. So I love seeing that, just kind of like these districts, they have the data, but how do we use it? And that's huge to be able to say, well, this is a bucket, this is your student voice, and this is, and having those conversations with them of saying like, hey, your tier 1, your tier 2, your tier 3 is you're kind of seeing how students are responding to things. This is capturing their voice, build that in. If you have students that you know you need to check in on, that this is a tool for doing that. And then on the right side there, we have our county-wide SEL community of practice, which is a big group who comes together and we just talk about SEL, like what are we doing in terms of curriculum? What strategies are working with you guys? What are you guys trying? Here's some things from California State. Here's some new things from research out of Berkeley, the greater good. We use a lot of that work. And we just kind of highlight, like, here's some best practices, but what's going on with you guys? But Kelvin and those county-wide pulses, we're having the discussion when we're navigating. So the districts who are in Kelvin and in this community of practice get to say, well, we're seeing in our Kelvin results, we're trying this, and this is kind of guiding us. And so it's down to a handful of teachers weekly meeting, talking about data, all the way to our county level SEL. We are banking on those Kelvin responses to guide our work. We need that student voice and we need to use it in different contexts. So I've loved how this is starting to surface as I'm talking in those consultation sessions with different districts that, oh yeah, and then we checked on Kelvin, and I'm like, yes, we capture that student voice, hear what they're saying, let's listen to them. And it's just great to see how it's kind of been just built in. The other piece that we've started last year, we had kind of getting those up and running of what do you do to come together, kind of another community of practice related to Kelvin data and those Kelvin leads coming together. So our goal and our vision for this year is that we want those Kelvin leads after the pulses to come together. And so Shere, I'll kind of have you touch on the Kelvin pulse conversation there and just what we hope to achieve with that.
Yeah, so last year, I think when we all started the school year, we thought we're going to start and COVID might look a little bit different. And so we had intended for these countywide data meetings to happen after each pulse and everybody come together. But we all know the reality of what happened last year. And so these people were just overwhelmed, as I'm sure all of you can relate, in terms of another meeting and trying to really dig into our data, maybe at the depth that we would like to. And so we're starting that again this year. And our hope is that after each meeting, we can come together and share the data. Something that's great about this year too is that our sites will have their own access to the countywide data lens. And so in the past, we would share that through these countywide data meetings, but also with our superintendents and some of the other different countywide meetings that we have, so that we would be sharing it out so they would still have access to it. But again, thinking about this year and kind of where we are and what our hope is that either we are on campuses helping them talk through their own data and learning to read and interpret and identify maybe areas of focus, areas to celebrate, and then what to do with it. So it could be more tailored to a site, but we are also offering this countywide so that we can come together and really feel comfortable, that leads feel comfortable in taking that data and sharing it with their own districts, and with our goal being to build capacity. So we want to support them, but we want to build their capacity to do this work too. So that's the goal, and that's where we're headed this year. That's our plan, which would mean, and also Kelvin is all the wonderful people you see here today. They're graciously helping with that, our first round, to make sure that we have their voice in how we approach interpreting the data, and can also bring everybody together to answer questions. And then Jeremy and I at some point will kind of take that forward and be leading those conversations internally with our people. And like I said, both as a countywide group, but also pushing back to sites, and had a few requests just to come out, and they want more of that personalized support, and we're happy to do that too. So just really a focus on understanding our data, interpreting it, making a plan about how we want to intervene, what do we want to impact between now and our next pulse.
And that's something we love. We're very good at collecting data, but what do you do with it? How do you use it? It's not just collecting, it's action. And how do we act on these pieces? And these are great conversations that we get to have with this new platform that we haven't historically had available to us. So some of the findings we have, it's interesting when you're looking from kind of a county office and you're saying, hey, we have something. Again, as Shere mentioned, this is not one more thing. But we have a metric. We have a measurement tool that we can use to see, are the initiatives that we are adopting bringing the change that we want to see? And immediately it was like, yes, like widespread interest. Like, how do we're just kind of building. We had people jump in on pilot, and now every year we're getting more and more administrators who are saying, hey, how do we get into this, or how do we more effectively use this? And the district's just truly valuing that data, because again, we have our dashboard for the state, and we have other tools that are kind of created by the districts, but staff changes, and if somebody's not rebuilding that or in charge of the implementation, it really you can see by the staff changes that changes. With Kelvin, when it's built in, and the students like year after year are seeing, hey, there's this cool dog that pops up, and we get to talk and kind of say how we're feeling, and it's already kind of through that IT avenue, it's not somebody in charge of either printing off surveys and making sure they go out, and which day do they go out, and are they collected, and who scores them, and what is it. It's the user is kind of off the plate there. So it's relevant data that is so much more hands off than are other ways that we capture student voice. So again, we're seeing that the consistency over time, we have districts saying, yeah, we like that there are these same questions year after year, or the pulse after pulse, so that we can measure and see that uptick and what's happening. And then the multiple ways that we're using the data, kind of as we mentioned before, it's amazing to have a district call and say, oh yeah, and we did Kelvin, like for that improvement team, like our teachers are using their classroom data to guide their weekly PLC groups. And it's just like, yes, that's so cool. The other findings that we have, the speaking to adult feature and the students having the ability to have comments and leave comments, that's a district decision. So we're toggling those on and off depending on the district needs. And we're finding that some districts are leaning so far in, yes, we want to be able to have our students speak to an adult. And then the others who are like, hey, we are so limited on staff right now. We just, we don't have the capacity to respond to that right now, but we still want to capture the student voice, but day to day we have substitutes and things. So they get to turn that feature off for the pulse. And then the other ones, hey, we want to read the comments, and other districts saying, no, at this point, again, staffing, logistics, all of that, we want to do that later, but right now. So that customizing of these features has been huge, because it's not just a drag and drop. There's different components that we can do within this process based on the context, based on the staff, based on the roles, to really help these districts feel like it's not happening to them and they're part of the process, and they're able to adjust this to adapt to the needs of them, their staff and their students. Sherry, anything to add with the findings there?
Well, I think in our pilot, the speaking to an adult really rose to the top as something that was so extremely helpful. One of our middle school administrators had shared with us that by selecting this feature and having students have the ability to, at the end of a pulse, select a button that says, I want to speak with an adult, had such a huge impact on how responsive the district could be. And they felt like it was an opportunity for kids to, without verbally going up and saying, I need to speak to somebody, especially the context here was middle school and feeling like kids may not do that, that this really was able to catch some kids and have conversations with kids and provide an opportunity to intervene with situations that they feel like they might have missed otherwise, because it was just, it's confidential in that the student doesn't have to verbalize out loud to anybody, but it just really, and they had it set up so it was sent automatically, I believe, to the school counselor. So when this happened, and the counselor followed up with it, and they just gained such insight to students, like I said, that they felt like they might have missed otherwise, because they're not sure the student would have expressed a need. I think with the comments, I think there is some, it can be a great opportunity, and I think really front loading kids on, things that might be helpful, and or what school sites found to be helpful were things like when a student, again, I remember this coming from the same middle school, they really learned a lot about students that they didn't know. As an example, I remember them sharing, I knew this one student was struggling. We didn't know why. We had asked him why, and we learned that the mom had moved out, and there was kind of just a really rough family situation that once the teacher learned this, they were then able to kind of, redirect, and it really intervened in the student's life. And they felt like really just a huge opportunity to impact how they dealt with the student and maybe what they did. So, like Jeremy said, you can, it is an optional feature to turn on and off. And I think they both have just really great benefits. And those were a couple of our findings from our pilot that we've shared for our districts who have the ability to follow up with those features should they be turned on. Just huge impactful support that these kids were given and or teachers were able to address. So.
Few words of advice. First of all, hello, Kelvin, Holly, Justin, all right, like the team here, words of advice, they're amazing. Don't be afraid to send out the email, get help, meet with them. The implementation of this and our routine huddle meetings that we've had with this team have been phenomenal and just foundational to this work. So we're so grateful for the Kelvin team and their just hospitality and everything that they've done for us to get this up and running. And we understand the work that they've been doing on the back end to get this going. We are just so grateful that this team has been just in fully supportive and of service to this project. So number one, definitely a lot of gratitude for this team and that advice of just like, hey, lean on these guys and they're really there to help and they're so responsive and supportive. Other than that, we have the understanding of the why. And if you're looking to scale more, it's starting with that conversation about, hey, what are you getting from your students? Like we're building schools for kids and we need to hear from the kids. And do you have an avenue that you're currently doing that? And typically the answer is, well, kind of. And this is just, hey, look at what this can do. Look at what this can, like Kelvin and just the way that this is structured, how you can capture that voice. It really builds the why. And then Kelvin becomes the how, and it just kind of feeds right into that. So it's just getting that up and running. Again, as Shere mentioned, starting with a pilot, test out with a classroom. If you're really looking to scale this, it's that momentum and that inertia that we're just watching like, whoa, okay, now it's going, now we're off and running. But we started small and we're ready for that. And it's just been amazing to see what that front loading and all that work that we've previously done and how that is helping with our current implementation and scaling. Again, that Kelvin lead, we're all about relationships. Kelvin is a relational platform. Like you've got to have somebody that you can rely on and talk to and be able to say, hey, and have them be able to contact you or Kelvin, and just building those relationships. And that point person who knows the system has been just a great asset to the scaling and to how widespread our Kelvin use has become. And then kind of building into that why, looking at how this is an existing, we can use this to measure our existing initiatives. This is not one more thing. This is not something you're dragging in and like, okay, everybody's got to like start over. It's like, no, this is a measurement. This is a metric to see what you are doing. Is it working or not, and capturing that voice. And then we love the concept of overtime, the questions and cross county and cross context, but we know these are the dimensions that we're looking at are foundational human experiences that we truly care about. So it doesn't really matter the context. We know that these are important, but we do want to have that adapting within that. But overall, like these are our core values that we're looking through. And then that Kelvin toolkit, just like, hey, I'm out of ideas and I'm using this curriculum, but I need something new and I don't want to just Google something. We have research-based strategies that we can pull from through Kelvin, which has been like, okay, I need something here. That has been a phenomenal tool that we've seen some amazing things happen within classrooms because they can just click and say, oh, this looks good. And we know it's coming from a source that has some data and some research behind it. So anything to add there, Shere?
No, and I think we're just going to see if there are any questions. And but yeah, no, I think you covered everything there great. And I think that we've kind of really addressed all areas of how we've been using it. And I think that key, just alignment to whatever you might have going on is really helpful if you're considering this as a countywide initiative, because we all know everybody has so much on their plate. So how can we connect it to existing work and start small perhaps? And there's so much to learn when you try something new. So just really that helped us troubleshoot and know how to roll it out in a larger way. So
yeah, we're here Q&A, any questions, and I'm going to pass back off to you, Holly, to share screen again.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you, Shere, both of you, for an amazing presentation. It's just so exciting to see how it's over time built into something that even down within the nested level of to the teacher level, having that intervention with students and seeing how it impacts students' lives. That's just I think, a great testimony of the usefulness of Kelvin at the various levels from county, district, down to teacher level, and really just helping the student.
As before we jump into the questions, I'd love to just reflect on two ideas which Jeremy and Shere spoke about, just what I'm taking away. And I think, the first one would be I saw this idea the other day in education, is going slow to go fast. I think so often, especially when it comes to SEL and mental health, we want to kind of solve everything straight away. And of course, because we are human-centric, that makes a lot of sense, so it isn't a bad thing. But I think, as you guys really demonstrated to us, to really take one step at a time. And then, as they like to say, is it becomes the plate. It isn't another thing on the plate, it's the actual plate. It's supporting and facilitating the work that we're doing. So just taking that slow, that crawl, walk, run approach, going slow to go fast for educators, for schools, for districts, whoever's using this, for counties, I think it's a fantastic model. So thank you for sharing that model and how you guys have implemented that so successfully. Not trying to rush in and get everything done straight away is wonderful to see. And, the second thing is, when looking at data, I know we can become so overwhelmed. We look at the data, we say, oh, this is going wrong, or this is going right, or this or that. But that approach, I learned from the fantastic Wendy Barron, who actually did the work at the Greater Good, Berkeley. I think she created a lot of the content, and she created the framework of the collaborative assessment log, which is really this idea of looking at one thing that's going right, one thing that isn't going right, and what are your next steps to take over there. And I think looking at the dimensions through those lenses of just like going one step at a time is a really, really powerful tool. So that's a couple from the Kelvin team I wanted to reflect on. And yes, definitely we'll get to the questions now. So thank you again, Shere and Jeremy, for these fantastic insights.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat from Eric, kind of more a product question about the use of the reports. I know we have several different reports, but there was one asked question about the aggregate data report, but doesn't have what Eric was looking for. And I did mention there is another report within the same place that you find the aggregate report. There is a raw data report, and that has more specific data in it that you might be looking for. And then I don't know, Holly, if you wanted to address reports in general.
Yes, I mean, we can. I do want to kind of keep it within the scope of our county-wide topic of screeners, but we can definitely address that if that needs to go that direction. And actually, I do kind of want to ask Shere and Jeremy, not to put you on the spot here, but talking about reports and data, have you found that you've needed to dig into kind of that extra data, pulling the aggregate reports or the raw data and putting it into other systems, maybe if you're using EduClimber or some other kind of software where you're pooling data from other collective sources?
Yeah, so I will say we're not to that point yet where we're pulling it into other programs, but what we have been looking at a lot, mainly through our county-wide lens, and then schools are using as a comparison to their own site, would be the overall dimension data, both through the different student groups, so looking across the heat map, and looking for areas to celebrate, maybe. And really kind of just to what is standing out, just that first glimpse of, is there anything that's really standing out there that I need to target? So not necessarily a report to be responsive to as a standard protocol, but more of, is there something really that's grabbing me? So just the overall dimensions and then the overall questions have been two that we found really helpful. And then that of course shows, movement from the previous pulse. Did we grow? Did we stay about the same? What was our movement? So those have been, I think, for us in terms of the county level view, been something that's been very helpful.
Yeah, and I think we've had a couple sites who did pull the raw data and just pull and had some background with statistics and just that analysis. So that is there. It sounds like, just reading the chat, is kind of a larger scale, 50 sites. what we recommend to our districts is, I mean, many of our districts have like 10 sites within them. So filtering by, it's just kind of a smaller scale. So for us to speak to kind of that meta level and the larger level, we're looking kind of cross within a smaller sample size. But I do know that there has been success within our sites who have pulled the raw data and manipulated that through statistical programs. They've been able to pull different graphs and just kind of evaluate. What I do know from those conversations is that really makes it into a smaller pool of the site level who understands what's happening. Not everybody has the background in the statistical analysis. So most of the default is looking straight to the reports that Kelvin provides within the platform and using that. That's been a lot of our experience of just kind of pulling straight from there and not necessarily diving into the aggregate or the raw data.
Thank you both for speaking to that. I think that's really helpful to think about just how the different needs that can be addressed with that. And our team, we will work with sites that need some additional data if they're looking for that. And I know Justin has mentioned he'll follow up on that one for you. And our team, they're very willing. We're all kind of data nerds over here too. So I know they get excited when we find out you're looking to dive into the data a little bit more. So we're always happy to work with your team if you reach out to us. I'm looking at the chat in the Q&A. I'm not seeing any more questions at this point. And I don't know if my Kelvin team had any extra questions to ask.
I think Jeremy and Sherry were so comprehensive that they covered everything from start to finish.
Well, if something does come up, we are here. I mean, we believe strongly in this, and we fully support the Kelvin team and the relationship we have with this crew here. So if there does need to be additional conversation, Sherry and I are here, and we truly, from our values and what we're hoping to do within our county and for our students that we get to serve, like Kelvin has been really accelerated a lot of the work that we've been trying to do. So we're so grateful for this, and again, grateful for the opportunity to come speak with you about it. And so thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sherry and Jeremy, for your time today and sharing with us just the evolution of how you've used Kelvin in your county and seeing that work come to life. And we're so grateful for the work that you are doing to support students and support all of your teams across a very large county, and again, sharing your insights with us. So for everyone that attended today, thank you. We'll post this recording later, and you will probably see something in your pop-up if you are currently a Kelvin user, and in your Pulse site, we'll probably post the link as well. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you to our wonderful panelists.
Thank you. Take care.